into a private room to check on a stroke victim. The patient rubbed his feces in his face, and Harvey became angry and lost control. And he said the next thing I knew, I was smothering him. And it was the last straw. And I just lost it. I went in to help this man, and he wants to rub that in my face. Now, following the murder, he cleaned up the patient, hopped in the shower before notifying the nurse. No one ever questioned it. Just 3 weeks after committing. Hello. Okay, so Donald Harvey, he is this self-proclaimed, sorry, chocolate got out of my hand, angel of death. Okay, and he was a serial killer with about 37 to 87 victims between 1970 and 1987. And his victim profile includes both male and female patients by several methods, such as smothering with plastic and pillow, poisoning with arsenic, cyanide, demerol, morphine, and codeine, and deprivation of oxygen using a faulty oxygen tank. Now, um, the oxygen tank in Ohio. And in August of 1987, he was sentenced to life in prison. In November of 1987, he was sentenced to life in Kentucky. So, welcome back to the True Crime Lounge podcast. I know it's been a minute since I actually posted anything. For that, I apologize for that. I've been so busy with work and everything else. I really kind of forgot about this for a second. And but like, I don't know. I'm sorry. But this podcast is on Spotify and YouTube. I do have a Patreon that you can join for early access to episodes scheduled to come out. I'm not really doing any more seasons right now. I'm just doing like episodes here and there because I am so busy with other projects that I have going on. So please bear with me. As you can see, we are sitting on my bed. Yes, my desk is cleaned off, but yes, my bed is more comfortable. And I just got done celebrating a coworker's birthday, and I was like, screw it, I'm gonna sit on my bed today. I don't really care. But anyway, if y'all are new here, hit that like button, ring that bell for notifications. Also, please subscribe, help a girl out. And I also have a merch shop for all your true crime gear, and I really want to hit 100 subscribers, so please, please, please help a girl out. I get that if I'm not really your taste or whatever, or what, I get that. So we're just gonna have fun, and we're just gonna go with it. Now, for any updates on my channel or podcast, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Now, with that being said, why don't we dive into today's episode, shall we? Now, do you know the show Criminal Minds? For those of you who don't know that show, it has, Lord help me, possibly one of the sexiest men alive in my opinion, Derek Morgan, and Spencer Reed. Oh, now if a guy talks to me like Derek Morgan talks to Penelope Garcia with the mind of Spencer Reed, that's a huge turn on in my eyes. Anyway, if you've seen Criminal Minds, then you might have heard them mention a few times something called an angel of death. So, what exactly is an angel of death? Well, an angel of death is a type of serial killer who is a medical professional or caregiver who intentionally kills patients under their care. Now, they often are in a position of power and they may use their knowledge to kill their victims. Some examples include angels of mercy, malignant heroes, um, healthcare serial, and malignant heroes. Now, what's the difference between the two? Well, for angels of mercy, these killers may believe their actions that are merciful and especially toward the elderly and the chronically ill victims. While the malignant heroes, they're killers who may intentionally bring their victims close to death, killing them at the last possible moment. Now, healthcare serial killers may be optimistic and work in specialties with vulnerable patient groups. And they work at not they worked night shifts or staff rounds, and they used health counseling to attain there we go. There we go. That's a little bit more comfortable, I think. Anyway, they used the healthcare setting to obtain their means to kill, such as poisons or tampering with equipment. So, with that being said, John Powell died at Drake Memorial Hospital in Cincinnati, Ohio, of cyanide poisoning, and the police would target an orderly by the name of Donald Harvey, who was their March in March of 1987 and present at the poisoning of Powell and the other patients who mysteriously passed away. Now, if it was under questioning if Harvey admitted to killing more than 50 people throughout his life, and digging further, it found that the hospitals Harvey had worked at all had very high fatality rates, and some of his acquaintances, even his gay lovers, had even also perished suddenly. Now, for his part, sorry guys, I have an ulcer in my mouth. My mouth hurts right now too, so. Anyway, Harvey claimed that he had been simply putting ill patients out of their misery. He he could often offer an explanation for not offer explanation for the other deaths. Now, he would eventually plead guilty to 24 hospital slayings, receiving 20 years to life in prison for each count. He collected a life sentence for the deadly poisoning of a neighbor. He was tried in Kentucky. He was again pled guilty, and then this time he would plead guilty to 8 counts of murder and 1 count of manslaughter, and was sentenced to 8 life terms and 1 20-year term. So, what do you think about this serial killer? Well, we know that he was born in Butler County, Ohio in 1952, and he claims to have murdered 87 people. The official estimates of the numbers he murders can range between 36 to 57 deaths. He is a professed angel of death, and he is currently serving 4 consecutive life terms in the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Ohio and everything. So, what about his history? Well, dating far back at the age of 18, Harvey would work in and around the medical profession, beginning his career as an orderly at the Marymount Hospital in London, Kentucky. Now, he will later confess that during his 10-month period he worked at the hospital, he killed at least a dozen patients. Sorry, y'all, I forgot I had that chocolate in my hand and I had to start eating it. So good. It's my favorite Christmas candy of all time. Anyway, Harvey insists that he killed purely out of a sense of empathy for those suffering and those who were terminally ill. However, he admitted that mm, however, he also admitted that the many of the killings committed were due to the anger of the victim. He is also notable for having kept his crimes from coming to light for 17 years, and the true extent of his crimes may never be known, since so many went undetected for so long. Harvey is notable for having numerous methods to kill, such as arsenic, cyanide, insulin, suffocation, miscellaneous poisons, morphine, turning off ventilators, administration of fluids tainted with hepatitis B or HIV. Now, there's also the insertion of a coat hanger into a catheter, causing abdominal pain, abdominal puncture, and subsequent peritonitis. And cyanide, arsenic were his favorite methods. Like, imagine being a serial killer having your own favorite method. Like, I know it's a red flag, but the book girly in me, really? That's your method of choice? Why did you? I had to know the psych behind this. I really do. I'm not gonna lie on that one. But the majority of his crimes did take place in Marymount Hospital in London, Kentucky, and Cincinnati, Virginia Medical Hospital, and the Cincinnati Drake Memorial Hospital. And while he was working there, he acquired the nickname the Angel of Death, as if he noted that he was present around a number of patients who later died. So, what do we say? Let's dig a little bit deeper, shall we? Well, Harvey was a gay and self-styled occultist. He attached himself to the medical profession when he was 18. He worked as an orderly in Marymount Hospital in London, Kentucky. Not make sure you get confused with London, England by no means. Anyway, from May 1970 to March 1971. In 1987, he would confess to killing of at least a dozen in his 10 months on the job, smothering two with pillows and hooking them in near empty oxygen tanks in an effort to, quote, ease their suffering, unquote. Now, he was arrested for burglary March 31st. He pled guilty to a reduced charge of petty theft for the next day, escaping with a $50 fine. Like, what the hell? Like, seriously, guys, like, what? How does that go from there to petty theft? Like, explain to me, someone, please. Anyway, my mouth hurts. The judge recommended psychiatric treatment for his troubled condition. Now, troubled condition, you're probably wondering. BS, right? I'm allergic to all of this, right? Anyway, Harvey chose the Air Force instead, serving 10 months before he was prematurely discharged in March 1972 on unspecified grounds. Now, what happened back home in Kentucky, you might ask? Well, he was twice committed to the Veterans Administration Medical Center in Lexington from July 16th to August 25th, and again from September 17th to October 17th. And his mind was ascribed to committals to mental disorders, with Donald kept in restraints, and the lawyers would also later refer to a bungled suicide attempt. Now, the recipient of 21 electroshock therapy treatments, Harvey emerged from the Virginia hospital with no visible improvement of his morbid condition. Now, concealing his record, he found work as a part-time nurse's aide in Cardinal Hill Hospital in Lexington between February and August 1973. In June, he added a second nursing job at Lexington's Good Samaritan Hospital, remaining in that position through January 1974. And between 1974 and September 1975, he worked first as a telephone operator in Lexington, moving on to the job as a clerk at St. Luke's Hospital in Fort Thomas, Kentucky. He kept his killing urge in check somehow, but it also became increasingly more difficult to manage. Finally, driving him away from home, he came across the border to Cincinnati. And from September 1975 to July 1985, Harvey held a variety of positions in Cincinnati VA Medical Center, working as a nursing assistant, a housekeeping aide, a cardiac catheterizing technician, and you ready for this part? An autopsy assistant. That's right, I said autopsy. Kind of messed up, right? But in the latter position, sometimes he stole tissue samples from the morgue, taking them home to, quote, study, unquote. If y'all are listening, you can't see my face. You can see, like, how messed up I'm thinking this guy really is right now, right? Or you could probably just imagine my face right now thinking that. Now, aside, I love how I said on the side. Anyway, on the side, he murdered at least 15 patients, supplementing his previous methods with an occasional dose of poison. Once joking with ward nurses after his patient's death that I got rid of that one for you. Like, I'm sorry, but who makes that kind of joke? That's just kind of sick and morbid person. I mean, I get it. I have a dark and dry sense of humor. So, but at that time, considering you have a past with this stuff, is it really necessary to make this kind of joke right now? Now, nor were his victims limited to suffering patients. But he was also mad at his neighbor, Diane Alexander. After they got into a fight, he laced her beverage with a hepatitis serum, nearly killing her before the infection was diagnosed and treated by the doctors. Now, on July 18, 1985, he was caught leaving work with a suspicious satchel. And what would this include, you might ask? Well, it would include security guards would find a .38 caliber pistol, hypodermic needles, surgical scissors and gloves, a cocaine spoon, 2 books of occult tour, and a biography of a serial killer, Charles Somerhead, and everything. Now he was cited. Now he was cited by federal officers for bringing a weapon into VA facility, and he was fined $50 and forced to resign from the job. Again, basically a slap on the wrist. Now, 7 months into it, um, Harvey was hired as a part-time nurse's aide at Cincinnati Drake's Memorial Hospital, later working his way up to a full-time position in 13 months. Before his ultimate arrest, he murdered, not one, not two, not three, but I could do this all day on this one, 23 more patients, disconnecting life support equipment or injecting them with a mixture of arsenic, cyanide, and petroleum-based cleanser. Outside of work, he sometimes practiced on his live-in lover, a Carl Heiler, poisoning him after an argument and then nursing him back to health. Sounds very toxic if you ask me. Sounds like the guy just wanted toxic relationships. Now, his parents were poisoned, also poisoned. Carl's parents were also poisoned. His dad surviving, while his mom was killed. This guy's messed up all the way in the head. And more, so March 7, 1987, a patient by the name of John Powell, as I mentioned earlier, remember that name, right? Well, his death was ruled a murder, and the autopsy results placing lethal dose of cyanide in his system. So, when was Harvey arrested? Donald Harvey was arrested in April, charged with 1 count of aggravated murder, and held under $200 on a $200,000 bond, while he kept him when he filed for a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. By August 11th, he had confessed to a total of 33 slayings, and a bond was revoked 2 days later with a new charges filed. As Harvey played a numbers game with prosecutors, adding victims to the tune of 52, his mental state was questioned. Psychiatric tests employed and scrutinized by experts. A spokesperson for the Cincinnati prosecutor was also going to say this man is sane, competent, but he's also a compulsive killer. Like, like he builds the tension up in his body, so he kills people. And Harvey, for his part, insisted that he only murders for mercy killings, admitting that some, including attacks on his friends and acquaintances off the job, had been done so out of spite. In televised interviews, he has discussed his fascination with black magic and pointed to refusing to discuss his views on Satanism. Yeah. So, on August 18, 1987, Harvey will plead guilty in Cincinnati on 24 counts of aggravated murder, 4 counts of attempted murder, and on 1 count of felonious murder. Uh, 20 now a 25 a 25th guilty plea 4 days later earned him a total of 4 consecutive life sentences, barring parole for the first 80 years of his term. And this was for good measure too. So, and the court will levy about $270,000, $270,000 and fines against Harvey, with no realistic hopes of collecting the money. Now, moving out of Kentucky, Harvey confessed to a dozen of Marymount slayings in September 7, in 1987, entering a formal guilty plea on 9 counts of the murder in November. But in Breaking, we talked about this guy before. Do you remember John Wayne Gacy? Yes, we talked about him before. What's the record for the accumulated victims? Breaking that. Imagine that. So, Harvey earned another 8 life terms plus 20 years, but he was still not finished. Back in Cincinnati during February 1988, he entered guilty pleas on 3 more homicides, 3 attempted murders, and drawing 3 life sentences plus 3 terms, 7 to 25 years on the latter charges. With 37 confirmed murders and confessions nearly tripling out that body, he holds the records for America's most prolific serial killer. So, here's my question. What led this guy to kill this many people? Well, in order to do that, we have to look into his background just a little bit. He was born shortly after his birth. His parents relocated to Boonville, Kentucky, which was a small community nestled away in the eastern slopes of the Appalachians. Um, in an, in an August 14, 1987 interview with the Cincinnati Post, his mom recalled that her son was brought up in a loving family environment and everything. Now, Martha Turner, who was the principal at his elementary school, attended Harvey attended for 8 years, backed up these comments and everything, and she even would go on to say Donnie was a very special child to me. He was always clean and well dressed and well trimmed. He was a happy child, very sociable and well liked by their children. He was a handsome boy with big brown eyes, dark curly hair, and always had a smile for me. There was never any indication of abnormality. Abnormality? What's that mean now, you might ask? I'm curious on that one now. Well, former classmates of Harvey described him as a loner and teacher's pet, and he rarely participated in extracurriculars, and opting instead to read books and dream about the future. Following his graduation from Sturgeon Elementary, he entered Boonville High School in 1968. He earned A's and B's in most of his classes with little effort, and he became bored with his daily routine and drop off. Having no real goals, sure he was not sure what he wanted to do with his newfound freedom. For unknown reasons, he eventually decided to relocate to Cincinnati, where he secured a job at a local factory. And in 1970, work would begin to slow the plant, and Harvey would be eventually laid off. His mom called him a few days later asking him to travel back to Kentucky to visit his dying grandfather, who was recently placed in the hospital there. Harvey agreed, and within days set off to Marymount Hospital. Although no one at this time, this trip, no, oh no, although no one knew at this time, this trip will later prove to be the beginning of a long journey of madness and murder. So, how does this killer emerge in this time? When in Kentucky, he spent much of his time at Marymount Hospital and was soon well known and liked by the nuns who worked there. And during this particular conversation, one of the nuns asked him if he would be interested in working there. Um, he would be interested since he would be interested in working there as an orderly. Since he had not been currently employed and didn't want another factory job, he agreed and started working there the next day. Although he was not trained as a nurse and doctor, Harvey's duties required him to spend time alone with patients, since some of his duties were changing bedpans, inserting catheters, and passing out medication. Harvey's first few weeks at the hospital were uneventful, but something snapped in him along the way. To this day, criminal psychologists are unable to explain what brought his murderous tendencies. I would love to know what brought this on, honestly. Like, then again, we may never really know. Now, whether he was unable to cope with the pain of suffering from those around him or simply enjoyed watching the victims may die may never be known. According to his later confessions, he considered himself an angel of death or mercy killer. But the details eventually revealed about his first murder was that it was from self-deprivation. Now, during an evening shift, just months after starting at the hospital, he committed his first murder, and years later in 1997, interview with Cincinnati Post, this is how Harvey described it. Keep this in mind when I'm telling you this. When he walked into a private room to check on a stroke victim, the patient rubbed his feces in his face, and Harvey became angry and lost control. And he said, the next thing I knew, I was smothering him, and it was the last straw, and I just lost it. I went in to help this man, and he wants to rub that in my face. Now, following the murder, he cleaned up the patient, hopped in the shower before notifying the nurse. No one ever questioned it. Just 3 weeks after committing his first murder, he killed again when he disconnected an oxygen tank from an elderly woman's bedside. And after the weeks went by and no one detected foul play on his first two, he became more brazen, whether out of boredom, opportunity of experimentation, or his methods varied in each murder. I wonder if these are like victims of opportunity, honestly. Um, He also used various items such as plastic bags, morphine, and a variety of drugs to kill more than a dozen patients in a year. In one case, he chose an exceptionally brutal method. The patient had an argument with Harvey because, he thought, Harvey was trying to kill him, and during the course of that argument, he reportedly knocked Harvey with a bedpan. Upon recovering from the blow, Harvey waited later that night, stuck into the patron's room, and struck him with a coat hanger through his cafter. As a result of the puncture, infection set in and the man died in a few days. On March 31st, 1971, a drunk and disorderly Harvey was arrested for burglary. Now, while being questioned about his crime, Harvey began babbling incoherently about the murders that he has committed, and the arresting officer looked at these claims and questioned it extensively about him, but in the end, they were unable to find any substantial evidence to back them up or charge him with any crime related to him. A few weeks later, he went to trial for burglary charges, pled guilty to a charge of paid theft, and after paying a small fine of insurrection for this indiscretion, Harvey decided that it was time for a change of scenery, enlisted in the Air Force. So let's talk about MO for a second. Well, he served a year in the Air Force before, less than a year in the Air Force before he received a general discharge in March 1972. His records list an unspecified ground for his discharge, but it was widely rumored that at the time that his superiors had learned of his confessions in Kentucky and did not want to have him in similar matters for the future. After release from the military, he dealt with several bouts of depression, and by July 1972, he was unable to control his inner demons and decided to commit himself to the Veterans Administration in the medical center in Lexington, Kentucky. He remained in the middle ward in the facility until August 25th, but he did admit it to himself a few weeks later, following a bungled suicide attempt at the hospital. Harvey was placed in restraints and over the course of the next few days and received 21 electroshock therapies. On October 17, 1972, he gained a release from the hospital, and Goldie Harvey later condemned the hospital for releasing their son so abruptly. Feeling that he had no apparent signs of improvement upon his admittance, he spent the next few months trying to get his life back and eventually found work as a part-time nurse's aide in Cardinal Hill Hospital in Lexington. In July 1973, he started as a second nursing aide job at Lexington's Good Samaritan Hospital and kept both jobs until August 1974, where he took up a job as a telephone operator and then secured a clerical job at St. Luke's Hospital in Fort Thomas, Kentucky. According to those latest confessions, he was unable to control his urge to kill during that time. And a more feasible explanation would be that he did not have the same access to the patients at Marymount that which would explain the job. Now, the majority of serial killers are opportunists, and Donald Harvey was a man with few opportunities. Yet, he had man with few opportunities. He had yet not yet evolved to take urges outside his place, so he felt that the safe was committing the crime in the dimly lit rooms in his killing sanctuaries. Harvey was a different kind of hunter. In order for him to get a hold of his prey, he had to first find the right environment. In September 1975, he moved back to Cincinnati. Within weeks, he got a job working as a night shift at the Cincinnati VA hospital, medical hospital. So, his duties varied, and he performed several different tasks on where he would needed, and he worked as a nursing assistant, housekeeping, cardiac catheterization technician, autopsy assistant, which is still messed up on my part. Messed up, I'm thinking. Oh. But however, he found his niche and wasted little time starting before he had left off. Since he had worked at night, he had very little supervision and unlimited access to, virtually, any area in the hospital. My foot's asleep. Oh. And over the next 10 years, he murdered at least 15 patients while working at that hospital. And he kept a precise diary of his crimes and took notes of each victim, detailing how he murdered them, pressing a plastic bag in a wet towel over their nose and mouth, sprinkling rat poisoning on a patient's dessert, adding arsenic and cyanide to orange juice, injecting cyanide into an intravenous tube, injecting cyanide into a patient's butt. Also, all the while he was committing these crimes, he was refining his technique by studying medical journals for underlying hints of conceal his crimes. Over the years, he amassed the astounding 30 pounds of cyanide, and he slowly fiffered into the hospital for home for safekeeping. And while Harvey was a mixture of would mix a vial of cyanide and arsenic or arsenic at home and then bring it to work, when no one was around, he would slip into the mixture into a victim's food or pour it directly into the gastric tubes. So how was he able to overcome these boundaries? Well, here's the thing. The 80s was a different time, basically. There was a lot more cares and stuff out there today and everything else. So, and it was like, and regarding love, um, it was very much one of those things you didn't really talk about, I guess, which I'm saying this, and I was born in 96, but I just know what, history has told us. Now, in the early 80s, it was about variations of, um, it brought about many variations of his methods. He moved in with his boyfriend, well, gay lover, whatever we call this, I don't know. He moved in with his paramour, let's just call it that. And he soon began poisoning him out of fear that his mate was cheating on him, and he would slip small doses of arsenic into his food, and he was later too ill to leave their apartment. And his confidence was hitting peak levels, and he began feeling as he was unstoppable. One night, following an argument with a female neighbor, he laced one of her beverages with hepatitis serum, nearly killing her before the infection was diagnosed and treated. Another neighbor, Helen Mexer, was not so lucky. He put arsenic in one of her pies, and she later died at the local hospital. Now, in 1983, he had a squabble with his boyfriend's paramour's parents, whatever they want to call themselves. I make no judgment. Um, anyway, and he began to poison their food. On March 1st, 1983, Carl's dad suffered a stroke and was admitted to Providence Hospital. And Harvey visited Henry there and placed arsenic in his pudding before leaving. He, Carl died later that night. And Harvey continued to poison his mom. Well, Carl's dad died later that night and continued to poison his mom. So, Margaret, the next year, all for the next year, but he was unsuccessful in his attempts to kill her. Now, in January 1984, Carl broke off his relationship with Harvey and was asked to move out. And Harvey was angry at his rejection and spent the next 2 years trying to kill him with a poisonous concoctionist. And at one point, he even tried to kill a female friend as a way to get his revenge. While neither attempt worked, he did manage to land Carl in the hospital at one point, as a result of the poisoning unknowingly being ingested. While working on July 18, 1985, security guards would notice he was acting very suspicious, so they decided to search his gym bag that he was carrying out. Inside this bag, they discovered a 28 caliber pistol, hypodermic needles, surgical scissors and gloves, a cocaine spoon, various medical texts, two occult books, and the biography of a serial killer. He was fined $50 for carrying a firearm on federal property. However, he was then given the option to quietly resign from his job rather than being fired. Nothing about the incident was ever noted or in his work record, and the hospital authorities did not open an investigation to determine if he had committed any other crimes at his other hospitals. Several months later, in February 1986, Harvey once again got out of the local hospital. This time, he was hired as a part-time nurse's aide at Cincinnati Drake's Hospital, and the new employers were unaware of his previous job. And his work folder had nothing but good things. Harvey soon earned a full-time position at the hospital and settled back into his old routine. Over the next 13 months, Harvey murdered another 23 patients, disconnecting the life machines, injecting into their veins, suffocation, injections, and everything else. Yeah. And you're probably wondering, when did authorities begin to get suspicious of this? Because at some point, you've got to think they would be suspicious, right? I mean, I would totally. So, they became suspicious of him in April of 1987 after the death of John Powell, a patient who was in comatose for several months, but has been starting to recover. And during the autopsy, an assistant coroner noticed that there were faint scents of almonds, a telltale sign of cyanide. Now, authorities were unable to find any evidence of motive pointing to any of Powell's friends. So they soon began to focus on the hospital employees whom had access to the room. The list was short, but upon learning of Harvey's hospital nickname, Angel of Death, he began to focus the entire investigation. They began to focus the entire investigation on him. So let's talk about capture. I think I'm coming down with a cold actually. Anyway, let's talk about capture, trial, and sentencing. In April 1987, after securing a search warrant for his apartment, investigators found a mountain of evidence against him: jars of cyanide and arsenic, books of occult and poisons, and a detailed account of the murder, and he had written a diary. Following a new discovery, and Harvey was arrested on one count of aggravated murder. After filing a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, he was arrested on one count, and after, like I said, he was held on the $200,000 bond. Now, the evidence against him was growing rapidly, and investigators were able to look into several other mysterious deaths at the hospitals. Now, Harvey realized that it was only a matter of time before they discovered the extent of his crimes, and he decided that now I should come clean and try to make a plea bargain, right? Well, it's like, I done the time. I think I can live with these crimes, right? Anyway, on August 11th, 1987, 35-year-old Harvey sat down with investigators and confessed to committing 33 murders over the past 17 years. As the days went by, the numbers eventually grew to 70. Investigators were skeptical in the numbers Harvey was giving them, and they went on to have his mental state assessed, and taking his claims as fact following several psychiatric tests done by numerous experts. A spokesman even claimed at the office. It's like, this man is sane, competent, but is a compulsive liar. He builds up the tension in his body, so he kills people. Not a good excuse to go kill anybody. Don't go kill anybody. Please don't. Now, Harvey entered the courtroom August 18, 1987, where he will plead guilty to 24 counts of aggravated murder, 4 counts of an attempted murder, and 1 count of felonious assault just 4 days later. On the 25th, a 25th guilty plea earned him a total of 4 consecutive 20 years to life sentences. In addition to his life terms, he was fined $270,000. He was also indicted in Kentucky in September 7, 1987, where he confessed to committing 12 murders while employed at the hospital. In November 1987, he pled guilty, and he was sentenced to 8 life terms of 20 years. In February 1988, he entered a guilty plea, and on 3 additional Cincinnati homicides in these 3 attempts, and as well. Now, 2 years later, the investigation into the remaining deaths was closed after the private investigator said that there was not enough evidence to pursue them. Yeah, what I'm thinking. Sorry, y'all. Now, in 1991, an interview with the reporter said that Harvey gave a glimpse into his mind, said, well, this is basically what he does. Why'd you kill him? Well, people controlled me for 18 years, and I controlled my own destiny. I controlled other people's lives, where they lived or died. I had that control. It was like, why, what right did you have to do that? He said, after I didn't get caught for the first 15, I thought, it would be, it was my right. I appointed myself judge, prosecutor, so I played God. On July 23rd, 2001, the Associated Press, printed an article listing the worst serial killers in the U.S. Who was rated number 1, can you guess? Donald Harvey. It was followed by, can you guess it, John Wayne Gacy, Patrick Gurney, Bruce Davis, and Dean Quarrel. Now, Donald Harvey's first scheduled parole hearing is set for 2047. He will be 95. And if you have his inmate number, I'll be happy to comment down below. Alright, y'all. That is it for this episode. I will see y'all next time. Y'all have a great day.